So good morning, good evening, everybody. My name is Laura Erickson. We are very excited to have you here with us today to talk about the future. It's a historic day here in the United States. I'm sitting in San Francisco. I'm actually sitting here in my office at Pier 17 on the waterfront, and the sun is quite bright. So sorry if you see me kind of squinting like that. But I'm very glad that everybody could join. We had an election yesterday. We've got some more uncertainty as a result. And we would like to take this opportunity to look together at the future with you and kind of help you learn how to see into it and give you some tools that can help you in your private life and in your professional life as you try and figure out where this is all going. And if there's ever been a year where things were uncertain, that is 2020. So thanks for being here with us. I introduced myself. My name is Laura Erickson. I'm head of innovation and sustainability here at Swissnex. We've got a team of about 15 people here in San Francisco, and we're a part of a global network with offices around the world in locations that are strategically interesting for for Switzerland in terms of education, research, innovation, and creativity. I've also got my colleague Natalia here with me today. She's running the, the show on the back end. So thanks, Natalia, for everything that you've done to enable this and to make it go smooth for everybody on the call. We're just doing a Zoom meeting here today because we wanted to see your faces. So if you are comfortable, feel free to take your camera off. It's kind of nice to feel like we're sort of in a room together in that way. But it's up to you. We will request that you stay muted. And Natalia, do you have any other short hygiene comments for our participants as they interact with us? Okay, Diana is going to walk us through some stuff later. So let me just frame the context of what we're talking about here today. We're talking about futures. We're going to look later on in the event at some signals coming from food, work, and education. But before we do that, we're going to learn a little bit about the foresight process and how they do that at Institute for the Future. So let me introduce you to our partner and co-host for this event, Diana Joseph. Diana Joseph is the founder and CEO of the Corporate Accelerator Forum. Diana has a PhD in learning science, if I'm saying that quite right. So she's a great person to speak with for understanding kind of how do we learn, how do we transform? And this topic is all about the transformations that are happening and trying to kind of interpret the signals that we see around us to form beliefs about what's happening in the future and where we're going. On this day of kind of great uncertainty in this year of incredible uncertainty, I just want to take a moment to say that, the world is really kind of a generative place. And we sort of, reconstruct our reality on a daily basis. That's been my experience of the pandemic for sure. And on this day, I'm reconstructing the reality in a new way after a historic election that is not quite decided. So uncertainty is sort of the name of the game, I think, in 2020, and with this workshop, which is the second one we've done together in this partnership configuration, we really want to support you as as we're all learning as a global society. So Diana, you're the learning expert. You can take it from here.
Great, thank you. A couple more words of introduction. As Laura said, I lead the Corporate Accelerator Forum. We're part of what I think of as a very big global vision, which is that everybody has to be more entrepreneurial. And our piece of that is working with corporate innovators who work with startups. Just that one particular link in the ecosystem. And there are some really significant needs in that space around how do you see the landscape from a single vantage point? How do you develop best practices from one shop? And how do you navigate the complexity of these two different audiences that you're working with, your internal stakeholders and your external startups? And so as you can imagine, uncertainty is a really important topic to us and something that we've been thinking about for a long time. Uncertainty is actually a really powerful place from which to imagine the future. right? There's nothing that you have to shove out of the way because nothing is settled yet. It's also very unsettling and can be really uncomfortable. And so we wanted to take a moment here at the beginning of the conversation uh, to just look at the emotions that we might all be feeling on this particular day. So I'm going to share my screen. This is an image created by the artist Abby Van Meugen. And actually she has this as a form now that you can fill out for yourself every day and think about where your emotions are. Let's do this. You have a function in your Zoom toolbar, probably, unless you're using it on the web. If you're using it in the app, you have a function in the Zoom toolbar called Annotate. It's under something called View Options. It looks like a pencil. The icon looks like a pencil. And if you choose Annotate, you can then select an icon. It's called a stamp. You can select a stamp and you can mark how you're feeling today. And I usually, when I do this exercise, I usually have at least 3 emotions going on at once, which is something interesting I learned from trying to do this. So I invite you right now to pick up a stamp from the Annotate toolbar and mark how you're feeling right now. It'll be anonymous. Actually, it'll come up with your name for a second and then your name will disappear. See some busy, some acceptance, grounded. I'll second that. Let's just take a minute, see where we are. These are Abby's emotions, so they might not exactly map to yours, but perhaps you can find a home. Somebody's right in the middle. Everything, feeling everything all at once. I know. This is interesting. So let's just, as the stamps are coming in, this is really interesting to see. What do you notice about the heat map? If you have something that you'd like to share, you can unmute yourself or just type into the chat. I can't see the chat, so perhaps Sean or Laura or Natalia can tell us what we're seeing there. What do you notice?
There's a lot of words there, and I'm seeing a lot of connection to what people are choosing. So it was hard for me just to see the breadth of all the words were there.
Mm-hmm.
Tired, yeah.
I will admit that I need my glasses.
Oh. I'm just
really
like leaning close to the screen so everybody can really see my forehead well.
But it seems that things are really all over the place, and well, and that makes sense, right? We're individuals, and we're also in different locations. Some of us are here in the San Francisco Bay Area, or other places in the U.S. Some are in Switzerland, or other places in Europe. Maybe we even have some from further afield. I'm not sure.
Anyone from among the participants notice anything you'd like to share?
In setting this meeting up, we did want to make it somewhat intimate. So if you have comments, we would encourage you to put your camera on and come off mute, and you can make a comment. This is a little bit more of an informal event with this today.
Well, for us in the U.S., it is election day, so it's a pretty unique time. So it brings up all kinds of feelings.
Yes. I'm glad you said that out loud. It makes me take a deep breath. Emotions are part of the system, right? Part of our apparatus that we've cleverly evolved to protect us and make it easier, make us more motivated to go after what we need. So they can be painful, they can be uncomfortable, we can feel hijacked by them. And knowing what they are can be helpful to help us make conscious use of them, rather than having that hijacked feeling. So thank you for recognizing all those. One thing I noticed, I think in the back of my mind, I was expecting to see more in the green area, more disgust and more anger. And it's just interesting, not good or bad, but just interesting to notice that those are not so frequent. Winneretta.
Yes. Hello.
Hi. I heard that you would like to. I wanted to check in to see if you would like to had something you'd like to say.
Yeah, I mean, I can share how I'm feeling about it also. I'm in Switzerland, so I work for École Hôtelière de Lausanne, the startup incubator that we have. Well, we're not as involved as the Americans right now, but I must say I didn't sleep last night because of the American elections. So we're also quite, I think what's going on is impacting the whole world. And that plus COVID is a very, very difficult time. But regardless, a lot of my emotions are in the, I'm very serene and happy and feeling strong. So it's a mixture between the purple and the, yes, I guess the green, the yellow. It's interesting to have the mixture of emotions. Where I'm very worried about the startups also that we have in Switzerland, because my incubator is about food and hospitality, and our sector's just been shut completely. So it's yeah, from a business point of view, it's very, very challenging for our clients and our ecosystem. Yeah, but then on a personal level, I feel very strong and confident.
That's a great place from which to help the people you're worried about. You have strength to spare, perhaps,
I hope.
that you can lend to them. Yes. Great. Other thoughts before we wipe the slate clean for the moment?
I'll have a comment here. Joya from Swissnex in San Francisco. Also, as I went through these words, I felt like I could feel most of those if I try to feel them, right? Like, I think it's just a matter of where you put your attention ultimately. And, you know, of course, this was a rough night for everybody who cared about the elections. And so when you come out of that mindset, it's like fearful and worried and fragile and vulnerable. But when you just, I don't know, I just made breakfast for my son, and that's fulfilling. And, you know, so I think it's really where you put your attention. And I think that's what we always need to be aware of. Like, we can go to any place we want, to any emotion we want, put our attention there.
Yeah. Great point. And they all have their superpowers.
So this is Herman. It's been an interesting time. It still is, right? We're still in flux. It's not clear what really happens, which is superbly interesting. It's the wrong word. Something, right? It's superbly something. We're in the soup. We're in some kind of in-between crazy neutral zone. But, you know, I'm an immigrant. I'm from Switzerland. I live here in Palo Alto. And what is really sort of present for me is all of a sudden having a sense of, do I belong here? Which is not something I ever felt that strongly. And that's very disconcerting, right? That's where I feel my grief. And then sort of this rage grief component. And I'm a person who gets mobilized by bad stuff. But right now I'm definitely feeling mostly kind of out of ways with the moment and with the potential, right? With Trump putting out a thing saying we won, and unless they steal the election from us, that scares the crap out of me, right? Because it's like a call to something that I never imagined possible here. when I arrived here and what I've been experiencing in the last 40 years. So there's definitely a significant amount of sort of vulnerability and grief and rage and deep concern for me at the moment. And there's a sliver of hope, you know, that somehow that hope that got us to this point, into this election, that somehow it's going to come around. Mm-hmm. But boy, it's not easy.
Mm-hmm. Yep, all of that is very real. Anything else to share? I noticed that as each of you was speaking, I took a deep breath, and I didn't know I was going to do that. I don't have like a traditional practice of that or anything like that, but I noticed it happening, and I liked it. So I want to say a couple of technical things that are pertinent to our emotions in this particular, very specific, uncertain moment. And then I'm going to invite everybody to take a couple deep breaths. So there's a lot. One thing that I noticed last night is that news is entertainment. And I'd heard that before, but I didn't really get it until I was watching news channels that I tend to agree with, getting very, very excited about like numbers when there were only 25% of the vote reporting in. And that's not meaningful, right? I don't think that's, when I think about what I want from news as far as information, I don't need to know what the score is when 25% of the vote is in. And so I got very amped up last night, and then I noticed that was happening because of the entertainment factor, like the actual sort of emotional efforts that were being made by the newscasters. And that sort of set me back to remembering that over and over again, we've been hearing in the US that we would not know. We were very unlikely to know, and we really wanted to, but we're very unlikely to know who the president was going to be on November 3rd. It was very, very likely to take longer, that it was likely to take a long time to count the votes. And that's where we are. So that helped me with the sort of painful surprise aspect of it. And then the other thing, the other technical thing is that we were expecting problems in voting, and there were very few problems in voting. So the apparatus is working as it should, and I have great confidence that we will have a proper legal election, just like we always do. If that helps anybody. All right. There's another deep breath that keeps on happening. Okay. Clifford says that the deep breathing is the essence of all yoga training. All right. So let's do it. I'm going to do it. I invite you to do it. I think I'm going to do it 3 times. Thank you for doing that with me, or pausing while I did it, if that's what you did. That's also fine. I invite you to take a moment. If you're interested in this heat map, I invite you to take a picture of it. We will send you the drawing itself, along with, I'll make sure that we include a link to where to get the form of the picture. I'm going to erase the stamps now, so you get to have your emotions, but now we're going to say goodbye to the visualization of them. Goodbye. And the last thing for me to do here is to talk about Sean a little bit. He's going to give you a more detailed introduction of himself, but Laura and I have been talking together about the future for a long time, and also with Sean. Sean is from the Institute for the Future, which is I think of as kind of the premier forecasting organization. And I have learned so much from Sean and from the Institute for the Future, and I use their tools all the time. They make everything that they do, or much of what they do anyway. I don't know what else they have in the bag, but they make much of what they do available on their website for free. And so everything that you learn here today, Sean has made it possible for you to take away with you. Sean, thanks very much. Thanks for being here.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here, everybody. And I see a lot of familiar names, which is also nice it feels like I'm around a coffee cooler right now with folks. So like Anu, Lisa, Herman, Quentin, Brigitte, Katerina, good to see you all here this morning. So we're gonna spend some time thinking about what life will be like after COVID, which seems a little daunting now that we're in this really peak, a big shift upwards with people getting COVID. But we're gonna get past it at some point. And what will life be like afterwards is a question a lot of people were asking back in March and April. I think a lot of people realized over a few weeks that it's just not going to be a 2-month or a 3-month process. It's going to be maybe 6 months, maybe 9 months, maybe 12 months. Here in the Bay Area, I don't think people are going to be going back to work until summer of next year. And we'll see how that plays out depending on if a vaccine comes out, if people take the vaccine. Does the virus mutate, which it looks like it's already mutating because it's a coronavirus and that's what they do. So a lot to be learned, but we dove down into post-COVID research back in March and April timeframe. We had the luxury of having 3 foundations in California fund it. The research is a little bit US focused, US centric, but you can see hints in every nation around the world of similarities. It is in the public domain, so everything I'm sharing with you is public. This presentation will be shared with you after the fact in PowerPoint format. We'll have links to the public research materials, and we're going to be augmenting those materials within a couple of weeks or so with some additional data links, signals, suggested action steps, and a more thorough guide on how to use the materials. The thinking is any team, department, organization, or industry can use these materials to think about their own scenarios about how to come out of COVID, or how to think in a systematic way about what they're doing. And who we are. IFTF's been around for 52 years now. I've been here, I'm on my 17th year. Our role is to think systematically about the future in a constructive way to help provide frameworks for people to think long-term so that they can make actionable decisions in the present. We're based in Silicon Valley, but we have a global perspective, and we cover domains such as technology, cities, health, food, learning, work, you name it. We've probably looked at it over the last few years. And this gives us a really nice holistic view of the future. We don't contend to have domain expertise on every single industry or every single question. What we do have is skills around that how to think long term. And so we often match that up with our clients who do have that internal perspective, often in a shorter term. So you match our longer term with their shorter term perspective, their internal and our external perspective, and you get a nice view of the future. One last thing I'll say is we don't make predictions. Prediction is sort of like a 4-letter word at IFTF. If you really look into the utility of foresight, it's around identifying internally consistent, plausible futures that then people can talk about, to discuss, to learn new information. Oh, I didn't think that could happen, or I didn't realize that, or oh, that's your perspective on that forecast? That's interesting because I think this. We want to draw out insights. That's the purpose of foresight, is to draw out insights. And once insights are on the table, you can really discuss them and then identify some action steps based on those insights. So you won't hear me use the word prediction at all. I'll use words like forecast, scenario, foresight, etc. This presentation is going to go into a little bit more detail on what foresight is, how it's utilized. Then we're going to go into some of the scenarios that are been brought forth in the work. And then we're going to focus in on some signals. Signals are signposts of tomorrow. They suggest a path towards a forecast. The signals that we're going to share are on food, work, and education. And within the body of research, you're going to see a lot more signals once you have downloaded the information. But we want to help prepare you, build out your own capacity to be a signals hunter, to find signals, seek it out in the world, so that you can start to build this capacity within yourself. And once you start to gather signals, you're not going to stop. It's going to be a skill that I think you'll be using on an ongoing basis. But it's sort of like the bedrock of being a foresight professional. The reality of foresight is you have to think both long and short term. So there's this dual, you have to live in different time eras. So you're sort of like a time traveler. You're moving back and forth in the long term and the short term. And one of the key things we've learned is, in order to think effectively in the short term, you have to make the long term urgent. It has to be something that people see some kind of a sense of urgency around, to build momentum, to do something about. So that's one lesson that we've learned around foresight. It has to be urgent. So when you talk about the future, you have to tell the story of urgency in some way. If we fail in the short term, the impacts can be not just years or decades, but millennia. What happened in Chernobyl, if you haven't seen the HBO, it's not a documentary, but it's mockumentary, but it gives a real insight into what bad can happen, and how long it can happen for, and how it can impact those locally and not so locally. So we really have to make really good informed decisions on our long-term thinking. And it's not an easy thing. People aren't built to think long-term. So it's a skill that you can learn and evolve over time. So we're gonna dive into a little bit about that. One thing we've noticed, or noted in academic research, is the way the human brain works. So if you understand how the human brain works, that helps you do things in a foresight capacity. If you were to place yourself into an MRI machine and have somebody ask you a question about the past, these are the areas of the brain that would fire up on the left. If you ask somebody, or if somebody asked you the same similar questions about the future, you'd have similar places in the brain fire up. And that's because of how the human brain works. It's a data repository of memories. And so in order to think of the past, you have to recall a memory. In order to think about the future, you have to recall a memory. So that sounds kind of odd, but to think about the future, you actually have to have experience talking about the future. You have to have conversations about the future, so that as the future unfolds, you start to see the future unfolding because you've actually discussed it in the past. So to be really good about foresight, you actually have to spend time reading about scenarios of the future, because you're creating memories in your mind when you're doing this. One thing that's also challenging in this world is that what's happening right now is at the top of the mind. So in most of the world, COVID is at top of the mind. We can't think of anything else. Here in America and some other places that care about the politics of America, the election is also top of mind. But we have to realize there's these other things that are going on in the world. Climate change is an issue. Wealth inequality is an issue. The brittleness of our supply chains is an issue. You learn about all these other things. And we have to make sure we're not just focused on politics. We're not just focused on COVID. We have to deal with all these other things as well. We could just sit back and just let the world burn and just let things happen. But most people want to take some kind of agency and control their future. So foresight is one of those ways that you can take control. Some people just can't. They just want to sit back and watch Netflix all day and not read the news, not involve themselves with other people. That's probably not a good strategy to lead yourself forward either, and take agency. And the last thing I would say is, earlier I mentioned urgent futures is a key thing. The other thing we've learned over time is futures have to be optimistic. When people wake up on a Monday morning and want to go to work or do something productive, there has to be some kind of thing that gets them to do what they want to do. And And so if they have a sense of optimism, that's really useful. The opposite of depression is optimism. Depressed people see no future, but optimistic people do see a future. So one way to help people who are in a depressed nature or an anxiety-ridden future is to provide them with an urgent optimistic future, to help shake them up, help get them to realize we're not just stuck in this world, we can move forward. And so when we began doing this work, we realized there are some tactics that you can take at the individual level to start to deal with the issue of COVID. One is to assess just what's going on around the world. We at this time live in a world where more information is available at our fingertips than any other time in history. At the same time, mis and disinformation are also rampant. So we have to really be good about navigating the bullshit out there. And something that I'll share with you after the fact that's complementary to this is a work that we did on, how do we call it? Cognitive, cognitive, why can't I remember the name of it?
Dissonance?
Not cognitive dissonance. We have to be really good at, I'll think of it in a minute or two. We did work with a government group in the US on cognitive immunity. So how do you make yourself immune from this mis and disinformation that's out there? So we did some work to think about how you do that at the individual level and how to do that at the organizational level to make you immune from all this cognitive stuff that's going on out there. It's finding its way, the mis and disinformation is finding its way into politics, but it's also out there for mis and disinformation around COVID, mis and disinformation around vaccination, mis and disinformation about corporate brands. So some of you work at brands, you may not want mis and disinformation out there. So how do we deal with that when the world revolves around social media? Another thing that's really critical is history repeats, history rhymes, history resonates. So things we've done in the past, often we repeat. So it's probably not a surprise to learn in the last global pandemic over 100 years ago, there was a split between the masked and the unmasked. And we see that again. There's definitely a group of people that believe in masks, and there's a group of people that don't believe in masks. So how did that play out? Will is strong guidance on how things will play out today and in future pandemics. But looking back to look forward is a very useful skill doing this. Signals is something I alluded to earlier. That's what's going to follow in the third section of this presentation. But you want to see what's emerging. You can't just have a forecast and have no signals that suggest we're moving in that direction. So you have to have some kind of proof that there's something happening today, either a new technology, a new business model, a change in social sentiment, a new law or regulation. These are all examples of signals that suggest we're moving in a different track, a different path. And so being good at identifying a signal and realizing how it can expand as well as combine with other signals is really critical. Earlier I mentioned there's no way to predict the future, but you can look at alternatives. So that's one useful thing to really unpack. This could happen, that could happen. They're all internally consistent. And as the future starts to unfold, if we're going in one direction or the other, we will have probably identified different insights. And so as the future unfolds, you can start to see the insights that you had generated weeks, months, years ago start to emerge. But you want to see a range of possibilities to kind of stretch your mind to identify as many insights as possible. Values still stick through in all this. We have personal values, we have organizational values, and we probably want to see those realized through whatever decisions we make. So don't lose track of your values, your morals. Keep them consistent so that you can sleep at night, live with yourself. Almost said sleep with yourself. And we also have to constantly review and adapt. How are things changing? Is there an evolution? And one of the things we realized in the scenarios is we thought we saw one scenario happening, and it seemed quick that another scenario was playing itself out. And if we see how the situation is changing, we can also see how ourselves, our teams, our departments, our industries are also changing to match that. when we look at the past, everything led up to this very point in time. And as the future unfolds, there's a lot of different things that can happen. So we're now right in the center where lots of things led up to this point. And from here on out, lots of different things can happen. And we want to be prepared for any of those options. And so if we look at the top, the middle, and the bottom, that kind of prepares us with a viewpoint of the different possibilities. And again, what would we do differently? How would we live in that future? How would we win? What skills would we need to survive? Who would we need to partner with? These are kind of the questions we want to ask when we're presented with these futures. Now, historically, IFTF has looked at scenarios around pandemics and quarantines. This is an example from 11 years ago where we looked at a future. Basically, the story was there's a large AI that can forecast when humanity will cease to exist, because we want to know that. So some benevolent billionaire created this big system, or a government agency created this system to look at the impending doom of humanity. And they identified 5 things that would lead to to the world, humanity's death. The biggest one, the top one, was quarantine. A worldwide respiratory disease outbreak just decimated the world. It didn't have a vaccine, and we just had to live with this disease and kind of get by. There are 4 other issues: global food shortages, energy issues, an emerging market around the bad actors of the world, the outlaws, and then just a huge generation of climate migrants, people that had to move because the climate didn't allow them to live where they were. If faced with the death of society, what would we do? Would we just say, okay, we're going to die, or would we do something about it? We would do something about it. We don't want to die. So that's an example of where we've forecasted this in the past, learned some things. And then 2 years later, we looked at anticipating quarantine, where the technologies that would exist, abundant mobile computing, sensors, diagnostic imaging, social network dynamics, all of these things would allow us to deal with quarantine in advance, prepare before we really needed to prepare, anticipate a quarantine to squash that disease down. I've read recently that the amount of money that we would need to spend to deal with this in the future is around $250 billion over 10 years. So globally, if all of society spends $25 billion a year and follows the playbook, we won't have another disease outbreak. That's because we have these kind of technologies and we have this mindset. So if we choose to follow the leaders, if we choose to follow the experts, the health professionals, we got it, right? But humans are the hardest thing to forecast. Humans are irrational. Humans have fears. Humans don't understand statistics. Humans can be led astray. So we're in the situation that we're in right now. And the last thing I'll say before we move to a quick question is, in doing this work, one thing that's been noted, it's a lot nicer, easier, and better to be surprised by a simulation than to be blindsided by reality. We were blindsided by reality with COVID. We should have and did simulate it in the past. We just didn't follow the playbook. We didn't listen to the experts and follow through because those, I won't get into why we did it. We all know why we did it, or why people did it. But that's the end of like section 1 of this presentation. If Natalia would put up the question here, this is a quick Q&A just to gauge what we're thinking. So where are you spending most of your thinking lately, past, present, and future? And do you think the pandemic is fundamentally reordering business and society? So those are the 2 questions. And are we gonna address those right now? Do a quick summary, or are we gonna do that later? I can't remember if that was the goal.
I think we can look at, it would be good to look at them now.
Okay.
We wanted to see if we could, on the fly, kind of see if how it compared to the same poll questions we gave people exactly 5 months ago when we did a similar workshop to this together.
So Natalia, do you have the results to post?
So actually, people are not voting.
Oh,
So you,
okay.
folks, you just have to click the choices that pop up on your screen. So you just move your cursor, click on it, hit submit, and then we'll get the results into Natalia to
Maybe you needed a little extra time. I noticed that second question was really hard for me.
I want to go back and see what I said last time. Yeah.
I don't think we have that granularity, but yeah.
I had a hard
That
time
sure would
making
be
a
interesting.
good choice there. I needed one more choice actually on that second question.
Yeah.
Strangely, I still can't see Laura or Diana. Did you vote?
Yes, we did.
Strangely, nothing comes up.
Okay,
Let me quickly try.
so we will let you work on that on the back end. It sounds like people did. Okay, we'll do it again. Great. Now I get to rethink my answer. Yeah, we voted twice. Thank you, Marcin.
Now we're all felons for voting twice.
What does it look like, Natalia? Is it able? Are we able to pop them up?
I think it's not working actually on my end. I don't see any results. I'm going to end the poll and then see if something comes out.
Okay.
There we go. That could be the answer.
Thank you.
No, actually.
Well,
So we have a little bit of a different setup this time. We wanted to make this informal to allow people to participate. So we might have a little bit of trouble showing those right away, but we'll get them for you at the end, the worst case.
all right. Well, I'll move on to section 2 of this presentation. What happens next? This map and a group of scenarios is the initial release of the research that we began back in March, April timeframe. Basically, it's built off of some work that looking back to look forward. We found a fellow named Charles Rosenberg at Harvard who's looked at the history of medicine and science, and he's looked at pandemics and how society has rebounded from pandemics. And basically, society rebounds in 4 ways. Not rebounds. They deal with the pandemic in 4 acts. The first act is progressive revelation, where you identify what was hidden, what is ignored, and how these things burst out into the open. So think of it, our immune system is weakened, and now because it's weakened, we see all these other things popping up. Like if you get influenza really bad, you expose yourself to getting pneumonia. So that's exposed, where the pneumonia is exposed. So this is something that is very true that we see. The second act is managing randomness. What's a safe distance? 10 feet, 6 feet, 15 feet? Do we wear masks or not? Inside or outside while we exercise? Do we open or close schools? Are drugs okay? These are all random things that we're learning and are being evolved. So basically, yeah, so some scientists said some things in April and March that aren't true anymore. That's great. That's science. That's how science works. We learn and adapt and evolve our thinking. So that's fine for scientists to change their thinking over time because we now know more. The third area is we settle on a large scale public response where we all agree this is what we should do. America has not done that. Some places have. New Zealand, do you see New Zealand people going to sporting events without masks and rooting for their people again, their teams? So some places where if everyone does what they're told, give it 8 weeks, and now you can kind of go back to what life used to be like. And the last is moral reckoning. Assess what happened, who was responsible, how to prevent it the next time. So those are the 4 acts. Here in America, we're still between 1 and 2. Some places in the world have moved on to 3. We haven't moved to 4 yet. That's probably going to be a couple, 3 years. The vulnerabilities that have been revealed, these are the 7 that we've seen. Again, these are US centric, but in the rest of the world, you can see some of these things as well. Broken health systems, just do people have PPE equipment? Economic inequality is definitely there. If you have money, if you have access to a really good hospital and the latest, greatest healthcare, you're gonna survive. If not, you're less likely to survive. And climate is still happening. People are fleeing hurricanes and typhoons at the same time of dealing with COVID that are induced by climate change. So these are 7 things that we still have to deal with while we're dealing with COVID. If we look at the 4 scenarios, and again, they're outlined in the materials. I suggest that you read them in detail. Read them 3 or 4 times just to really familiarize yourself with them. Each of them has kind of a scenario forecast for health, food, work and jobs, education, and data governance. So if you go into detail, you see that. But this scenario is basically what America did initially through money, $2.5 trillion at this situation. Basically, not to save the economy, but to save the banks and to save the stock market. That was kind of the focus. A lot of people lost jobs over time. You see the other places where it's about saving the economy would be UK right now, closing down again, but providing 80% of income for those who have been furloughed. That's kind of a different tactic. In America, the focus wasn't saving capitalism, it was saving capitalists, small fraction of society. And where this rush to reopen impacts us down the road would be more focus on automation down the road. We will, if the focus is just making sure we're still profitable, the next thing to do is automate the workforce. Those early responders, the front lines people, the delivery people, those are going to be the first people that are going to be automated. And if you see at the bottom of the slide, response, reset, reinvention, this is something that we see happening again and again. Response is 2 to 3 years. Reset is where we end up after the response. Some people will look around and decide this is not where I want to be. And reinvention is, if I'm not happy here, where would I like to go? Our suggestion is don't put all your eggs in the response bucket. Have some people tasked with reset, have some people tasked with reinvention, because reset informs response, reinvention informs reset response. So there's no magic number of 80, 15, 5, 98, 2, but just make sure your organization has some focus on reset and reinvention. The second scenario is around constraint, and this is where people use technology and data to go into something called a germ pod. You already see Hollywood doing this. All the sports leagues around the world are forming germ pods. And even at the community level, you've probably podded up with a family, another family, your own family, just to get by. Humans want to do human things. I like to say humans human. And we need other humans to do human-like things. So one of the first things to do is do things within your pod, but start to see down the road a lot of gatekeeping around the pods. Have you had the test? Are you immune? If you're in the right pod, you get access. If you're not in the right pod, you don't get access. The third scenario would be collapse. This is the one where we see things pivoting in America away from growth and towards collapse, where just a thing like a mask becomes a political thing. A mask is like a seatbelt. It protects you and other people. It doesn't hurt you in any way, but for whatever reason, it became a political thing. And we start to see people with arms going places, potentially kidnapping governors. So this is not a good path, especially when the federal government doesn't provide guidance as they historically have. Where this ends up going is towards think Brexit in America. California goes away. Texas may go away. New York may go away. Some people may like that. Actually, both sides kind of like it for different reasons. But that's the scenario. It's probably not the most desirable scenario. The last scenario, personally, is my favorite. It's the one where I think we should go. It's where places like Japan, Korea, Vietnam, New Zealand have focused around mutuality, the well-being of all over individuals. And this allows them also to prepare for climate. The same techniques and tactics that they're using for COVID are going to end up being leveraged for dealing with climate change in their own societies. So mutual aid is the large response here, where people come together around sharing economy, civic literacy, and kind of the old vision of economics goes away, and the new modern economics comes into play. So focus is around keeping everyone employed, keeping everyone happy, keeping everyone safe, et cetera, as opposed to just saving the stock market. So those are the 4 scenarios. I just kind of brushed over them because that's really not the focus of this presentation. It's just to give you a taste of it. You'll on your own time, you'll be able to read these materials. We wanted to move into, I think it's here. Yeah, we want to move into the next question. We'll see if we have it working out. But the question is, which of the 4 scenarios presented seems most likely to you? The most likely. Yeah, what's the context at your local level, at your regional level, at the global level? A lot of that your response has to do with context.
So I do see some results coming in here. I think we have our issue with the polling, I think I'm somehow the host now. So I'm seeing them come in, and I think I just want to give people a minute here to fill it out. Did everybody get it out? If so, I'll end the poll and then share the results. Okay. We've got about, 14 responses. All right, which 4 scenarios seems most likely to you? Last chance for casting your vote. I'm ending the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so let's look at those results.
Most likely.
Yeah.
Long-term
Sean,
optimists. That's what I see here. A lot of long-term optimist perspective that we will come to. What's the Winston Churchill quote? At the end of the day, people come together and do good. That is a very horrible paraphrase there, but
I don't know that quote.
It's basically Americans screw up until the last minute when we all come together and do the right thing. But yeah, at the end of the day, we all want to live and survive, and if the clearest and most visible path forward is coming together for all, at the expense of some billionaires' profits, then that's where we are.
I love that there were 0 votes for collapse.
Yes, that really. I mean, that's great. So I wanted to say with the previous poll, sorry for that. I think we put this one up before I had the chance to share the results, which I was able to do for the last one after I realized that I had the host button or something. But I think this is consistent with what unfortunately I'm the only one that saw it on the previous voting saw, but people by a vast majority spending their time in the future. And I don't remember actually if people said that, things are going to change for the better. I think so, though. I think that was the one that was coming out on top. So I was already thinking that we have maybe, well, I don't know. It depends on the configuration of our audience. I wasn't sure if it was sort of the kind of, Silicon Valley kind of indomitable spirit will find a way, or, if that's something that's a little bit more widely shared across the Atlantic. So I will stop sharing this poll now. I think everybody's seen it, right? Yes.
Great. Yeah, a lot of long-term optimists here. That's good to see. Okay, so the last little sprint of the presentation is around signals that we're seeing going on. These are the things that inform the scenarios. So all the scenarios you saw before, each of these signals is happening today. So they kind of inform the scenarios in different ways. So I'm going to be looking at technology signals, business model signals, social sentiment change, how society is changing its viewpoint, and legal and regulatory signals. These are some of the things you see, and you'll see these just walking down the street, just a general observation, a conversation with a smart person while you're reading. So just I'll provide a little context around them, but the goal is to think about how they could expand in size how they would grow, but also how they would combine with other signals and what are the impacts. So if this expands, what insight would you have? What kind of impact does that have on you as an individual, as a family member, as a community member, but also as a worker, as an employee, as a team member, etc. So we'll start off with some food signals. And the first one is this is a technology signal where they're starting to create these little vending boxes that they place at the bottom of apartment buildings. And so it's healthy food, probably not as diverse as you would get at like a Cheesecake Factory, where there's like 1,000 options, but it's healthy food. You come down the elevator, you get it, you go back upstairs. And these are being provided in places like apartment buildings and office buildings. So very distributed food options for people that's healthy. A second one would be Whole Foods is opening up dark stores, which means it's a store with no customers. And you're also seeing restaurants with no customers. So these are the dark operations where things are happening, but it's combined with a distribution network of delivery. So if you start to see more and more of this, that could have looming implications for the restaurant business, for example, or it's like how groceries are distributed. We may just get really comfortable having things delivered to us. So some things that are occurring will not only become a habit, but will become basically something that we're going to live with for the rest of our lives, or for an incredible amount of time. A third is now that we're spiking again, people are stockpiling again. So what does that mean? Do you have toilet paper again? Do you have the vitamin D that you need? I don't know what else. For me, I got a lot of alcohol from Costco, not because I wanted to get drunk, but because I wasn't sure I'd have things to clean things with. So I got really cheap vodka from Costco, for example. But expect this to happen, especially if there's some kind of election unrest over the next week or two. But we're already seeing people stockpiling again. So just imagine if these expand, combined with other signals, what is the impact? What are some insights that you're seeing? Some work signals, working remotely permanently. This is seeing a lot of this, not just the tech community, but other organizations. Remote work is seen as maybe a thing that's going to stick around for a while. We're going to, after this presentation, we're going to dive deeper into this arena. But what are the implications? What are the consequences of remote work? Should we continue to do this? Business travel is the thing that pays for the continuation of airlines, especially when it comes to international travel. Business travel, usually when you travel business, it's not you paying, it's the boss or the department or the company that's paying for it. But that's where the bulk of the profits, and I'm talking 85% of the profits, come from business class travel. And if business class travel is not happening because we live in a world of Zoom, or we live in a world of fear of travel, or if we live in a world where travel is just not allowed because you as a person from X company can't go someplace, that has some major implications on just how business is conducted, how travel and leisure is done. So expand this out. What are the implications for the travel industry, for the leisure industry, for the tourism industry, convention industry, and just how deals are made? What kind of things you get to see as an individual? Another one is around how does innovation happen? A lot of people, organizations see innovation happening when people gather over a beer, over a coffee, around the water cooler, and just start talking. So what is the beer, wine, coffee, water cooler equivalent of a Zoom world? How are we getting together? I bet there's 10 books being written right now on innovation in an era of COVID, how to innovate in a remote work world. These books are going to be unleashed upon us very soon, because innovation is something that every organization wants to do. And how do we do that if we're all at home? Some education signals. The first one is a social issue, which is there's going to be a huge divide between in-person and virtual schooling, which is going to really push inequality. I'm blessed in that my wife stay-at-home mother, stay-at-home parent, can monitor my 6 and 5-year-old and focus on them. We had a Zoom issue earlier, credentialing login, because they went to credentialing through their kid's email address because they didn't want people Zoom bombing the rooms, but she was able to resolve that. I don't think every parent is in a position to resolve those technical issues. And also dealing with the balance of work-life balance is going to be a continued concern. So this is a social issue where some of the laggards are going to be those in the Hispanic and Black community versus Asian and white community. A second issue would be you go to school often for the socialness of it. And if we can't go to school physically, why am I paying all that money? So you see a huge group of people going online, and many of them are going to realize I'm getting the same skills at a much cheaper rate. So start to see higher education be impacted greatly by this online versus face-to-face or hybrid issue. And then the third signal that I wanted to share here is a technology signal where Microsoft is using some technology to teach science and AI, data science and AI. Their goal is to upskill 25 million people around the world, and they've already done this with 10 million people. So education is a huge space where the technology incumbents can come in and be a disruptive force because they have a different viewpoint. They're not trying to make money from training. They're trying to build talent that can do work to allow them to move forward their own goals at the organizational level. So again, signals can come from a lot of different spaces, tech, social sentiment, legal, regulatory, and business model changes. And this is the last slide before we move into the group exercise. Try to be a good lie detector. Don't just like and promote social media posts because it fits your worldview. Make sure they're accurate and real. This is a tough one because we all like our worldview because it's the right view, right? It's my view. Just be good at lie detecting and making sure things are truthful out there. We spent a lot of time in the beginning of this presentation on this emotional check-in. You have to do this with your colleagues. You don't know what they're going through. So just jumping into a conversation is really hard. So I spent a lot of time chit-chatting about family, about what you're doing lately, what's good about your new reality to help kind of ground and make sure the people I'm talking to are safe, healthy, and okay. So try not to be the boss or the person that just gets down to business right away. We need these check-ins. We also have to realize people are in different mental ecologies. Welcome to my bedroom, everybody. Did I know that in 2020, everyone would be coming into my bedroom on a daily basis? No. So we all work in different places, and we have to realize we're going to be interrupted, right? My daughter came up and said she broke her computer. She didn't break her computer. She thought she broke her computer because the login credentialing got changed. But we're dealing with doggos and kiddos coming in. Twice I heard my son crying earlier because something was going on. We're dealing with different mental ecologies, and we have to appreciate this work-life balance that's going on right now across society. When we solve problems, when we deal with issues, sometimes we fix things, sometimes we heal things. So this is kind of like the surgeon versus doctor perspective. From a leadership perspective, think through what's the best process and also articulate why we're doing things. Are we fixing this, or are we slowly dealing with it? Are we dealing with this problem on an ongoing basis? So understanding which mindset you're in is really critical. Also, we're going to be vacillating between being at home and being allowed to go out. Being at home and being allowed to go out. Right now, it looks like we're starting to crack down. UK's cracked down. France and Spain, I think, are about to crack down. Germany's about to crack down. America should be cracking down in certain places. I know El Paso and certain cities are saying, I don't care what the state's saying. I don't care what the federal government's saying. We got to crack down because there's not enough ICU beds. But we're going to be going back and forth like an accordion. And we have to understand that's to maintain life. And we have to be able to go back and forth in that world. Leaders are asked to do a couple of things. state a vision of where we want to be in 5 or 10 years, and you have to be a good storyteller that's urgent, optimistic about how to get there. I'm sorry, where we're going, but you also have to also talk about how to get there. So it's not just the vision of where we're headed, but it's the path to getting there. So as a leader, you have to be able to go back and forth between those two issues. We need to simulate the future. We need to talk about it. We have to be literate around these words for forecasts and signals and scenarios, and start having good conversations to form these memories of the future in your mind so that it starts to become a habit, and really building out your foresight skills. Understanding signaling, understanding forecasts, understanding scenarios is really critical in moving us forward as executives that people look towards to lead us out of the problems that we're dealing with right now. So that's the presentation. We're gonna do our best to pivot into the consequences slide here. And if anyone wants to say anything, Laura, Diana, Natalia, this is the time. I think we have one last question. Is that right? Yeah.
Now you have to put yourself in there a little bit.
Characterize the scenario you chose, the one I most want to see realized.
So in reference to the last question.
Yeah, so we all chose which scenario we think is most probable based on our reading of the signals, and then we have to say why we chose. Or sorry, I'm reading.
We may have chosen it that way.
Question. Why did you choose the scenario you chose in the previous question?
One of them is that very rational option, and there are other reasons why you might have chosen what you chose. So let's find out.
And okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll. Did everybody get the chance to put your stuff in there? I still see some things coming in, so. I'll just take a second just to say regarding the mental health stuff. That's the signal that has been the strongest to me during this pandemic stuff. If I'm interpreting how to read signals fine, I think that's something that we really have to focus on with each other. Okay, let's share these results. Do you guys see them? Okay.
Oh, nice.
Thank you, Natalia.
Again, urgent and optimistic.
So both some solid rationality and some aspirational thinking, which I'm a fan of.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll just take a moment to say with our contact information up there. Really feel free to reach out to me if if any of this material resonates with you, if any of the signal areas that we're looking at resonate with you. Like I said, I think we have to be here for each other, and I'm very open to kind of one-on-one discussions to try and help us figure out where we're going, as well as more structured business focused discussions. But really, I'm very open. This is the second time that we've gotten together to do this workshop. I personally see this as something that's in that optimistic direction, storytelling direction, to help us all deal with this massive amount of uncertainty that we're dealing with this year. Okay, so everybody's seen the results from those polls. Sorry, just because this is up on my side still.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
And Jason, yeah, you're going to get all these slides and links to the broad research as well. So just know that you'll have that. All the signals have a link in the notes to the story or the location of where the signal came from. And your role is to think through the what and the so what. What's going on is the story, and the so what is your interpretation of that, how it expands, how it combines, how it informs the scenario, the forecast. So we're going to go into an exercise. I know we don't have as much time as we normally did, and some people will have to sign off, but we'll stick around as long as people can stick around. And this is a process calling drawing out consequences. And to explain the story, I just use this little snippet of stuff. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the rider was lost. For want of a rider, the message was lost. For want of a message, the battle was lost. For want of a battle, the kingdom was lost. So this is the butterfly effect. Small things can have huge consequences. So we want to really dive into, and all for the want of a horseshoe nail. We want to dive into the consequences of of the world that we live in. So we start with a prompt, and then we kind of look at the second and third order consequences, a lot of chains. If this happens, then that happens. And then if that happens, this happens. And once you go down this chain, you start to discover a lot of information. You can really round out the thinking of a topic. So this is used in workshops to really dive deep into pulling out insights of a group to help ideate and brainstorm. So there's a group at the U.S. Forest Service that did this. Anybody can do this. The U.S. Forest Service can do this. You can do this. So they wanted to look at the cascading changes in forests, seeking a deeper understanding of consequences of forest management, action or inaction. So the initial prompt: hardwood forests lack age class diversity and will uniformly grow old. So if you plant some trees, like a farmer, they all grow up at the same, and then you cut them all down. And a traditional forest doesn't have that look and feel. You have in a meadow, on the edge, in a deep forest, you have all kinds of diversity. But when you start to look at farming of forests, things change. So one implication is people just think all forests should look like this. There's a decrease in early successional forests.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, that was Jason. He's talking to Mike. Significant increase in late successional forests and decreased resilience across the forest because of climate and weather changes. So, and finally, decrease in carbon sequestration rates because things are diversity adds more sucks in more carbon than a non-diverse forest. So again, there's second and third orders after that. And if you dive into their process, you saw that first one is decreased resilience. A second order consequence they had is there was more uncertainty around the timber supply. And a third consequence, which actually might be a fourth consequence, is just declining quality of school districts because of lost tax revenue. So one in the middle that I would say there would be, if there's more uncertainty around the industry, then the industry struggles and the profits dwindle. And then we see declining quality of schools because of declining tax revenue. But this isn't like it. Did you think initially that school quality could be combined or connected to the resilience of a forest? So this is a way to kind of pull out these kind of thoughts and ideas and brainstorm. So you start with a change or an event that's occurring and you build off of that. And our suggestion to work with you folks is to look at this, which was the first signal for work. Organizations shift most jobs to remote work. So 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we live in a world where 50% of the work is now remote. 50% of the knowledge work is now remote. The majority of us work from home. That's the prompt. And the ground rules for this is don't argue a point. Like if you're workshopping this, don't argue with somebody. Typical brainstorming things. Just if you, instead of arguing, ask for clarification if something doesn't make sense or appear logical. You can have opposing consequences. That's quite all right. And if you think somebody missed a step like we did with the Forest Service 2.5, suggest something that would come in first, but typical brainstorming processes. So I'm gonna stop sharing and let Diana take over from here.
Great. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to take advantage of this short time we have to stimulate us to move extra fast. So I have made a board that we can all look at, and I will be in here translating what you say. You are going to put your thoughts on this, on the consequences, just straight into the chat in Zoom. And I will pull them over from there and turn it into a beautiful wheel like Sean showed us from the Forestry Service. So we're starting with organizations shift most jobs to remote work. So please in the chat, type in what you think would be some first order consequences of that.
And I'll provide some color commentary. And if
Great.
no one comes up with anything, I'm gonna just start populating it.
Yeah, and I invite, okay, there we go.
There, Patrick.
they come,
Less
they come, they
business
come.
space is needed. You don't need
Yeah.
as much corporate space. Less office space is needed.
All right.
Oh, there's one. Time we save time. Yeah, I don't commute 3 hours a day anymore. I get 3 hours back every day. I love it. This is the happiest time in my life right now, from a work-life balance, from a family balance. Better rested staff. On that note, I get an extra hour of sleep than I did before. I was really concerned about my brain. Video conferencing software stocks soar. Yeah, we definitely saw the impact of those organizations that benefit from serving a remote workforce. Less commuting. We're not commuting as much. Less traffic on the highway, less pollution, less road usage taxes. So like in the Bay Area, we generate income for people using the HOV lane, but if there's no need to use the HOV lane, there's less tax revenue, or not tax revenue, road usage revenue. Children in the home workspace, this work-life balance that we have to open up and deal with this new reality that children are in the workspace and the workspace is in the learning space. More time for self or family with no commute. What do you do with all this new time?
All right. So we've got a few of them laid out here. I'm going to keep on going, and let's.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, thanks for zooming out. You have a lot of good ones here.
And I still have lots more to capture. So
lots of Zoom chat creates issues with eyesight. Yeah, designing. This is part of our mental ecology, our work ecology. How do you design environment? Technologically, you can add microphones and these light circles, light boxes, bigger, larger displays. We have to get more bandwidth. We have to understand that really about 3 hours is the limit for video conferencing in a day. My office, for example, doesn't allow any kind of meetings or engagements on Fridays. Fridays are kind of open to the employees' needs. If they want to read, research, work, go to the doctor, not take the day off. No one asks questions about Friday. More productivity because less moving around between meetings. Yeah, I like that one. We get more done because we don't have to move physically from one space to another. Less friends based on spontaneous meetings. We don't. Yeah, how do you make a friend in an era of COVID? A lot of that, you have to kind of find a force friend making now. How do you find friends? There's a website called lunchclub.ai that's trying to address that issue of creating new connections.
I think we'll need to develop new sort of HR, sort of like how do you start a new job? Here at Swissnex, we have a colleague who joined during the middle of all this, and that must be such an odd experience to move to a new country and join a new team.
Onboarding of new staff. Yeah.
All right, let's have a look. I've been typing like crazy. I've been copying like crazy. There's some.
Yeah, what we would do here is we got a lot of ideas on the table. If we had a lot of time, we would do some group some of these around because there's some commonalities. But we'd also start to say, okay, now let's pick 3 or 4 and do some second order no, you'd identify a few that you want to do second order consequences on, but you'd narrow in on, okay, the next one is like less business space needed. That one is already right next to the first prompt. So I would say right now, let's focus in on less business space is needed. What's the consequences if we don't need as much office space anymore? So if people can start to ideate around that one, if we don't need as much office space anymore, what's a consequence? And think of societal consequences, workspace consequences. Someone's excited about that. Impact on the work, impact on the family. So there's one. commercial real estate crashes, loses political power.
Ah.
This is a look back to look forward one as well. How has society bounced back in previous office space crashes, during the .com crash, during the real estate crash of 2008? We may see like a change in the nature of how office space is utilized. What makes office space desirable again?
I can say that I came into the office today to have a better internet connection, so that hopefully the recording won't be sort of jumbled on my side, so that, you know, there's those subtle things that you're maybe not thinking about.
Anu has a process question around the way to ask the consequences, and I would say this would be a A/B testing one. Depends on the group, depends on how much time you have. Right now we're kind of rushed with time, but we usually have like 5 minutes of just heads down. People just throw out write ideas down on big Post-it notes, and then when their heads are up, as a group, we'll have individuals share, and then we move on. You need a facilitator who realizes, okay, we've kind of hit all the buckets, and now it's time to go to the second area. But having some specific buckets like economy, technology, work, education, lifestyle, those are really good. But I just say there's no best way. It depends on how much time you have, and the technique and the capability of the facilitator. Fabian has a second order consequence. Empty quarters where we have only business buildings, so a lot of empty, unutilized space. Marcin, I would put sudden barrier here. Healthy or safe balance between virtual and physical production work. Real estate demand shifts. No need to be in cities for jobs. So there's a consequence where people don't need to be near jobs. They can move to the suburbs, and you're seeing this in the Bay Area, where rents are going down anywhere from 10 to 20% in the Bay Area. But outside the Bay Area, like Truckee, which is like the entrance to Tahoe, rates are going up 10, 15, 20%. Outside of Sacramento, housing prices are up 17% year over year. So where people work, where they live, changes. You don't need to be near the office anymore. You're seeing this in Tokyo, in Japan. The government didn't say no one has to come to the office anymore, but they basically said strongly worded that you don't need to be in the office anymore. And so corporate Japan has woken up into this, you don't need to commute anymore to work. So even a society that was so focused on the being in the office culture has been able to change. And if we don't need to be, another consequence is taxes. The tax base moves away or is challenged.
Very important consequence right there.
So
we have about 5 minutes left until the end. Just want to keep our eye on the time.
Great. So we can say a few closing words on this exercise. So what we've been doing here is grabbing the signals and the consequences that you've been coming up with, and mapping them. And we'll do a little more on this before we send it to you as part of the deck. What you're seeing right now is that the color gets deeper as the consequences get farther out, right? So we've been tracking organizations shift most jobs to remote work, therefore less business space is needed. We have empty, unutilized space, etc. So we'll share this map with you, and hopefully that will help you as you replicate this exercise in your own shops. Something that we've been thinking about and playing with and doing workshops around at the Corporate Accelerator Forum is taking this grounding in what we've imagined the consequences might be, out to mapping it to our vision and mission, and thinking about which of these pathways, suppose each of these is a pathway of consequences, which of those do we want to see, and would help our vision and mission? Which of those do we not so much want to see and might get in the way of our vision and mission? And then that starts to guide the steps that we take, the actions that we take to make a hoped for path more likely, and to mitigate a path that to either prevent and mitigate a path that we are less desirous of. I'd love to talk about that more, and you'll see workshops from us around that.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you, Sean, for walking us through kind of just a little, a blur of how the foresight process is done, the scenarios we've been working on around the pandemic at IFTF, and then helping us kind of practice, some of this future thinking, walking us through together with Diana in this signals and consequence interactive part. I want to just inform everybody that we'll follow up with, we can share the slides, right, Sean? With that, we'll share those poll results too that didn't quite get on there. And I think we also have like a worksheet for this signals and consequence kind of workshop that we can share with you along with that. Anything else that I'm forgetting that we're going to share with our attendees here? No. Okay. So
we'll share also the order form for the emotion wheel.
Okay, perfect. So I want to bring it officially to a close, just in case anybody has to move on to the next meeting. But if you want to stay on just for a few minutes, we can also take some questions or, some kind of like reactions to all, that sort of fire hose of, of information and meaning that just came at you. And I want to just close on my side saying thank you very much from Swissnex San Francisco for joining today. Thank you, Natalia, for everything that you did on your end to make this event come together. Thanks to our partners for doing this work with us. And I just want to say also that, it's important, your beliefs about the future and your beliefs about how you can influence the future. And that's really like the message that I want to bring forward, particularly in this time of uncertainty. I mean, there's never been a time that any of us have been alive where there has been so much possibility in that sense. But it's we're all leaders in this day, and we have to rise to the occasion. I really believe that, and we all have the possibility to be change makers. And through doing this type of future-oriented work, I think this helps us be able to look at different scenarios, so we know how we want to show up to make our mark in the world from the corner of it that we can influence. So that's my goal in doing this together with Institute for the Future and Corporate Accelerator Forum. So thank you, Sean. Thank you, Diana. And if there's any last questions, let's take those. Thanks, everybody, for your participation today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks, partners.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments anybody wants to end with? I'll just share a thought that, we in this 5 months ago when we did this, we kind of, thought that the rent situation in San Francisco was going to change dramatically, and that's happened in 5 months. So it just goes to show how quickly things can change.
Wow. That's poignant.
Well, thank you. It was very interesting. It was, and it's nice to be able to feel this human vibe working together with the group. So I think you did this really well. Co-creating. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that. We wanted to see your faces and whatnot. Last time when we did it, we did the Zoom webinar, and we just kind of spoke into the void, and we didn't really know who was there. So that was part of our goal today, was to simulate something like being in a room together. So thanks for putting your cameras on also, and for your participation. And really, if you have any questions, feedback, there's something that you got excited about that you want to try and maybe do with Swissnex or with IFTF or with Corporate Accelerator. I don't know if I can call you CAF.
CAF is good.
Just reach out. Like, we're open.
I love your idea, Marcin, of doing a survey. So we'll think about how we might do that.
Yeah, I thought only something like a 1-2 sentence for everyone, because we may have some thoughts after digesting it.
After digesting it, yeah. Can I ask what 1 or 2 questions you would love to answer?
Yeah.
What's on your mind that you'd like to that we should
mind
follow up with you about?
No, on my mind was something like, I mean, how the idea was very much focused only on the office jobs and the jobs we do. We do not have bricklayer here. We do not have everybody from other countries which are in totally different situation. They cannot work that they want, they don't know how to work remotely.
Right.
And still, and the second thing is production facilities, because there might be some disturbances, transport, supplies, international flight. This is going to have lots of changes. So I think so. Afterthoughts about the broader spectra would be nice at the end.
That's great. Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to have to go. Thank you very much.
Okay, everybody. So thank you for joining. We will end the meeting and looking forward to continuing the conversation with you.